Rita, you can come in front. The background music बंद हो गया. You are in time. Okay. Just wanted to share with you the struggle of the last session, which we have been struggling, haven't found solution yet. But I can at least tell you what is the purpose of the last session. The last session, we want to achieve how we are going to work together. But how do we structure it? Because some of the people who are part of the last session, which is collaborative session, haven't been there yesterday and today in most of the part. So they don't even know who have presented and all that. For those, I will do a small brief. And then also we realize that some of you who are in the last session named under different topics also have a small presentation to also make. So we have about 2:15 to 4:15, around 2 hours to achieve the collaborative partnership out of this meeting without any break. So can I request all the people who are part of this plenary of this collaborative session, Ankhi, Rita, Ms. Sudha Pirao, and Anirban, and Mr. Rajiv, right? Rajshekar, and you, and who else? Dr. Khan and Arjun, right? So all of you can share what you want to share in 2 minutes to 3 minutes to 5 minutes maximum, okay? So that we finish in half an hour or so the initial talk that you want to make. And then I have a chart that we are going to follow in terms of who all are the players and what we want to achieve and how we can then, put the responsibility or a structure in terms of what the role of the NGOs, the private sector, the international agencies, the government, and so on and so forth, and also for what purpose. So I'll also tell you little briefly what is the plan. So collaboration and partnership is the plan. Who are the players? NGOs, government, private sector, international agencies, and of course the implementers. The reason why I'm writing in implementers is that we had 12 presentations since yesterday and today, and primarily at the moment we are looking at them as a primary implementers all across the country for mobile and social behavioral related issues and projects. So their role, we will also discuss about their role, how they are going to play a role. Are they going to play a role as an advocacy agency or a funder or an implementer or a networker and so on and so forth. And some of the areas that we are looking at finding the purpose of doing this collaboration is to, do we need more innovation, incubation of some of the ideas. Some of the ideas may be working very well in Jharkhand but may not be working in Andhra Pradesh or something. Should we move it to there and expand it to there? Research and networking, do we need to create a larger network? Do more research, because this white paper is just an elementary draft paper. We are going to finalize it in a much more comprehensive way. But even more research, is there a possibility to have more research? Should we do it? Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to contribute in the research? And so on and so forth. Similarly, knowledge and sharing. We are about, since yesterday and today, we have almost got 90 to 100 people. And all significant people, they have something to play. They all are not only, people who are here to watch or something. They have something to collaborate. Should we create a knowledge base of this sector? This, we are talking about mobile and social behavioral change, because this is also not a topic which is generally, discussed on a day-to-day conference and seminar. It's a very different kind of topic. So should we create a knowledge base in that area and create a network list, email list, whatever? I mean, should we do that? And then the crux of the whole 2 days work is that if these 12, how do we scale that up? How we can work together to scale them up? That's basically broadly is the purpose. And having said that, Coming to more on a formal note, may I request Ms. Sudha P. Rao to please come and take a seat here. And, and then I will invite the rest of the people to also come here. Can I also request, would you like to start with your presentation and then? Okay, fine. So we'll start with her presentation and then we will have another people to speak one by one and then we'll take a seat here. Thank you.
Where is Sandhya? Just to put it on. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Can I also introduce you for 2 lines for the rest of the people? Ms. Sudha P. Rao is in Planning Commission. She is in the advisory group and she directly looks at the topic that we are directly related with, which is what is called as WCD, Women and Child Development. That's the main reason why we requested her and she is here. That means whatever we are discussing can also directly feed into the Planning Commission also. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to thank Osama for inviting me. We were together, we are on the screening committee for granting licenses to community radios. So when he asked me, I immediately had to say yes, though he didn't give me much notice. And the presentation as such, he gave me the liberty of making presentation also, which I am now sharing with all of you. The topic of my presentation is expanding the use of mobile phones, partnership and way forward. In India, we have more than 892 million subscribers. As all of you would know, having sat through 2 days, that most of them are urban based. There are 544 million urban subscribers and 347 rural subscribers with an overall tele-density of 72.9%, with the urban tele-density being about 3.4 times higher than that of rural tele-density. Actually, the number of telephone subscribers have been almost geometrically rising from 2007 itself. In fact, however, in the last year, there has been some tapering off in the growth, partly because there has been some reduction in landline connections and the environment with regard to mobiles also, many of the unused lines, numbers have been discarded with. The tele-density also, this is the other side, the tele-density has been rising from about 18% in 2007 to 73% in 2013. The overall tele-density in India is 73%, but it varies largely across the country. It is about 46% in Bihar and as high as 221% in Delhi. So you can see there's a large variation across states. In the northeastern states, it is 67%. The mobile ownership, which is something which sort of surprised everybody, or perhaps not the practitioners, when the census came out. About 63% of all households own a telephone connection and 53% have mobile phones. In comparison, just 48% have television and 9.9% have radio and transistors. That ownership of mobiles has become widespread. Mobile ownership is pervasive across income categories. Even in all slums, you would notice that most youngsters and anybody who's working, or including all part-time maids, all of them have their mobiles. In slums, 73% of households have phones, of which 63.5 have only mobile phones. In comparison, the percentage with computers is much less, and this living condition, especially of sanitation, is quite poor in these slums. Only 66% have toilets within premises. So mobile ownership has become sort of pervasive across income categories. Now, there have been some important changes in the rural telephony that preceded this exponential growth of mobile telephony. You may remember that there was a scheme called the Bharat Nirman Yojana, under which village public telephone was set up in villages. And for the first time after independence, many of these villages got connected to this mobile, to the world at large outside that having a communication means. But the percentage of women using this was found to be 17.2%. The repair and maintenance was undertaken by BSNL and by free of charge. This evaluation study was carried out by Program Evaluation Organization of Planning Commission. This mobile access leads to knowledge networks, dissemination of information, and there is which connects universities and research institutes. The rural broadband network provides connectivity to panchayats and is the base for implementation of programs like Aadhaar and geographical information systems. There are numerous applications riding on the ICT infrastructure, which leads to processes becoming more accessible, transparent, and accountable. The decentralization has led to democratization of information. There are both positive and negative aspects of the spread of mobile communication. It has led, on one side, to the democratization of communication. The connectivity through internet has also added to the the freedom of speech and expression. But there is a negative side also. There are these, through MMS, quite inappropriate content is often distributed, and which has an impressionable on young minds. And there are also rumors which are set up which leads to sudden panic, like we witnessed in Bangalore and Chennai, Pune, where northeastern students and others got SMSs which threatening them, and there was an exodus of students, and it became a very big law and order problem. As a result, global issues can suddenly become global. So we really do need partnerships to be able to squash these kind of rumors and to also deal with such things very sensitively. As for on the negative side, there is an environmental footprint also. India is the second largest mobile market in the world, next only to China. There are more than 4 lakh telecom towers, leading to a significant diesel consumption. Their partnerships are required for the use of green technology for running telecom towers, because this has a significant impact on your carbon footprint. Then there are some initiatives of the women and child sector which I specifically deal with. One is there is a mother and child tracking system of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, which monitors the delivery and child health care services. There is another scheme called the Indira Gandhi Matritva Sahyog Yojana, which is a direct benefit transfer scheme which is of the Ministry of WCD, which has developed the MIS. Actually, these are really MIS-based systems, but today with the interoperability of different systems, so whether it's mobile or it's computer, it doesn't matter much. The line drawing across is very thin. Then Planning Commission has got an NGO partnership system. On this partnership system, it's a web-based portal. Any NGO is free to sign up on this partnership portal. So we have more than 50,000 NGOs who have signed up on this portal. On this portal, you also have information of various ministries, the kind of schemes that they are running, for which NGOs can take grants and aid from. Some of the ministries with whom we are partners, they are insisting that the NGO has to be first sign up on this before they even consider grants, of releasing grants for NGOs. So this is one of the other ICT-enabled tools which is being used to have a partnership with the NGOs from government. Then there are various, there are only telephony or mobile use, which has child protection initiatives. There is the Child Line, which is where if you dial 1098, it is a 24-hour toll-free phone service for children in need of aid and assistance. It works in 30 states and UTs through a network of 415 NGOs under the Integrated Child Protection Scheme. Similarly, there is a Women Helpline 181 for women in distress. The Telecom Department has made this number available to all states to set up call centers. This came after the horrific incident which took place on December 16th in Delhi, after which it was decided that there has to be a contact of a helpline for women, and this helpline was granted, this number was given by the Telecom Department. The Southwestern Railways has a helpline which is Bangalore-based. After there was an incident of one woman being thrown out of the train, afterwards the railways have decided to have a helpline which helps all women, and it is based from Bangalore. There are also similar kind of initiatives taken by various state governments, like Gujarat government has an e-Mamta scheme, which is a mother and child tracking information system. The Bihar government has all the 80,000 Anganwadi centers. They regularly send SMS to women reminding them about the next health checkup due, and also when the child's immunization becomes due. These are also tracking tools for the Anganwadi center. Similarly, there are other schemes in Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, and in Kerala, and many other states also. Partnerships are required because even now, more than 50,000 villages in India need to be covered, then are not covered by any telecom service provider. The M-governance in social sectors such as health, education, and agriculture is urgently needed. In health, with advice on critical care, ambulance, and medicines, so also with disaster management for evacuation and for even how to deal with how to manage the disaster. So these are all areas in which partnerships are needed across all the stakeholders whom Osama mentioned, so that we can all work together, because one agency by themselves will not be able to provide the service in an effective manner, or even rehabilitation later. With the interoperability of systems, mobile has become the medium of communication, but however, greater coverage, geographical coverage is required. In fact, the PEO study showed that the quality of services and the services available in hilly areas was much poorer than in plain areas, so something should be done to ensure that hilly areas and even remote areas, are especially close to the border. In many states, they have a complaint that they don't get mobile services of requisite quality. So we have to see that services are available to everybody. You need penetration and access to women, children, most marginalized, and to ordinary citizens. At the same time, the service providers also need to provide quality services and correct billing, because a person staying somewhere very far away has no way to seek recourse, or some grievance redressal mechanisms also need to be set up. So I think partnerships are required for sensitivity and to deal with diversity. Mobiles have served to bridge the gap between the potential users and beneficiaries and the suppliers. And the availability and the quality of services that supply is a critical determinant for a positive outcome. It is here that major partnerships can make a major difference. So I expect that some partnerships and how we are going to go about making these partnerships or the conceptualizing them will be part of this workshop. Thank you.
That was wonderful. You should have spoken in the inaugural session. Please come here. You can take a seat here. Yeah, so this was a great. In fact, if somebody can help, we would like to know which are those 50,000 villages where there is no, they are under the shadow. It will be fun to work in those areas. Since Qualcomm is here, Vodafone is here, we can ask them that can we get those also covered. That will be interesting. Okay, I will go ahead and ask if from Nokia, Mr. Natesh, you can make a short presentation. Natesh is Director of Emerging Markets, so he is, of course, going to share with us that how Nokia has always taken over the rural India, and is it still continuing to take over, or is there some change?
So, thank you UNICEF and DA for giving us this opportunity. So, I know a post-lunch session is always a bit tough to manage. I'll try to keep it brief but specific. What I would want to share with you is how did we come across Nokia Life? What were the success metrics for us there? And most importantly, as the topic indicates, it's about collaborations. How did we get collaborations going with the government, industry, and NGOs? And how did we try to get the scale going? Keeping in view that from a consumer perspective, not being able to reach out to specific problems which he has, so how does Nokia Life address that? Those are the elements which I'll try to cover up on there. So just to give a quick background, there are about 3.7 billion mobile phones today across the globe now. But there is no equality among them. In just a second, I'll tell you why. So about 1 billion of them use the browser on their mobile phone to access information. They are evolved. 1.5 billion have a browser-enabled phone, but they still don't access internet or services such as that to access information. And you have about 1.2 billion who only have the very, very basic phones, and they still rely on traditional sources for their information. So you see the gap coming in there. Further, there are about 3.2 billion who are without a mobile phone today. So Nokia's strategic intent is to bring benefits of mobility to the next billion. Like how some of us access internet to access information, and we are more evolved than the others. We use this information to harness our livelihood and life improvement. In a similar way, Nokia's intent is to address that next billion out there. A quick snapshot, I'm sure during the course of the 2 days, all of us heard about consumer insights in terms of what someone needs. For example, a farmer is talking about how he needs market prices, to a mother who is worried about her kids' education, to someone asking about farming methods, to someone worried about the health, not only his health, but the health of the family. Can someone do something about it? Can someone provide them actionable tips? Those are the asks which are coming in traditionally from the emerging markets today, which is the next billion of consumers. So Nokia, being the most trusted brand, it's about connecting people to what matters to them. So Nokia Life has been a first step in this direction out there. It's been built ground up for the emerging markets consumer out there, markets such as India, Africa, where things are still happening. The focus of Nokia Life is clearly on livelihood and life improvement. We cover education, health, and agriculture. These are the three verticals which we specifically cover. Intent is to provide personalized information in a language which the consumer understands. We also understand it's a semi-literate audience out there. A lot of innovations have been done on the user interface to make this entire journey fairly seamless and easy. So I was talking about local information in one's own language. You have a screenshot which replicates that, where we are trying to teach someone English by using local language as a medium. So that's to that effect, getting into that amount of customization there. Most of these are pre-embedded on Nokia devices for ease of discovery. So almost all popular Nokia models from a price range of 1,000 to 5,000, because this is the target segment which you want to attract, have this pre-embedded on the main menu. Couple of clicks and you're able to activate it. And most importantly, we understand our limitations. We can only be a platform. We are not the content experts out here. So very essential to have all of this co-created along with a fairly vibrant ecosystem, which includes the organizations like government, NGO, industry also. There's a list of partners, a partial list of partners with whom we work fairly extensively in at least about 4 countries now. So it has UNICEF. With UNICEF, we have done programs for midwives in Indonesia, along with UNDP. But John Hopkins provides us with a lot of healthcare related content coming in from a subject matter. I think Sandhya spoke about our association with NGO, which is Arogya World out there. So on and so forth. Those are the sort of connects we have with the government. We also fairly work closely with the Ministry of Agriculture, extremely closely in terms of mobile related interventions and how it can benefit farmers. So this is the bouquet of services today Nokia offers: agriculture, health, education. More about collaborations with the ecosystem. I just want to take your attention in terms of the couple of projects which you have done. What sort of results did it yield? And the first one was with NABARD in Kerala, where it was about how do we improve productivity levels of farmers, who are growing vegetables and fruits. So it was an immersion which went on for about an year. About 20,000 farmers were given these handsets and were provided with very, very specific inputs, personalized inputs. And we also did a measurement of a before and an after. What was it before an intervention, and what happened post the intervention? So obviously 86% of them found the content to be useful. 93% told it was fairly accurate. And almost 1 into 15 virality. Now, if there is a good tip which is shared with a farmer, now what's happening is he's sharing it with 15 others, which technically means if you're talking about 20,000 farmers, and if they're sharing it 15 times more, see the effect which is coming in. So that was also an answer to the question, why do we call it a vendor lock-in or a device lock-in? Not exactly. There is a company which is providing you with scale. So if there is scale which exists, all of us know that in most emerging markets, including India, whenever information is disseminated, it is natural that that information gets shared with others. So in a sense, we are trying to be a catalyst out there. So that's the mindset which we try to work upon. Arogya also Nalini touched upon. So obviously what she didn't mention was the virality factor out here. We reached 1 million. The virality factor again was 15, which to net effect means 15 million people have been reached. Now that's the multiplier effect which these kind of interventions come in. We also worked with some of the industry players. For a major industry player, it was about personal grooming and hygiene. It was all about personal hygiene, which we tend to neglect a lot. We know that, we know, it's not necessary to wash the hair once a week or twice a week or whatever. These are very, very basic things out there. But we did drive across certain campaigns. Again, the connect was to reach about 1 million people and have a look at the trends. 80% found it to be useful. More than 50% shared this info with friends and family, and almost 30% or more indicated they're going to change their habits. This is again, you're talking about behavior change, and it is also reflected in Sandhya's presentation on diabetes out there. Similarly, hand wash was another initiative which we took up. Hand wash, all of us see, repeated communications coming in not only from the government but from various sources, including NGOs. Why is it so important to wash your hands? So that's the program which we took again for FMCG major here. And the results were fairly interesting. 72% found it useful, greater than 65% virality. So we talked about, why someone should wash their hands, and gave them certain use cases out there, and that was sort of spread again. And in fact, greater than 60% are confirming that they're now adopting it daily. So look at the behavior change out there again. Similarly, we tried an engagement with a tractor company, tractor and farm ancillary company. There again, they're talking about awareness and tips in terms of proper use of farm equipment out there. So there again, we contacted about 20,000 farmers who had purchased tractors, and it was all about how to improve farm productivity by using tractors and related equipments out there, to the extent of also sharing a tractor to a neighbor, so that there is also supplemental income, sort of coming in out there. Those are the efforts which we have done in terms of partnerships and collaborations. And besides Easy Vidya, which was spoken in the morning, we also tried a teacher training initiatives with Mobile Train, a company based out of Tamil Nadu. A lot of pilots were done around Tamil Nadu out there, and as we speak, we're trying to scale that up again. Here again, results were fairly useful. A lot of teachers told us that no one really bothers about us in terms of continued education. We hardly go to any formal training institution. We are willing to work with you on those things. So overall, from a Nokia perspective, it's all about value proposition. Is there a value for the consumer? Is there a value for the operator? Is there a value for you who's going to collaborate with us? And of course, is there a value for Nokia? So net, that's what we really look at. It might not be monetary in all the cases. So there are certain social obligations which Nokia also typically follows. And as long as it fits into the overall construct, we are more than happy to collaborate. So, just to sum up a couple of observations, mobile used as a family device in urban and semi-rural India, it's more, the penetration is more at a household level. So, you're now seeing a trend where, each individual has a phone in rural areas, but to a larger extent, it's still at a household level. So, which means that a mobile becomes an entry into the household. You could do many more things. And the father might have a different use case. He could be a farmer. He would want an agriculture-related information coming. The daughter or the son might be interested in education. The housewife who's not aware of healthcare, she might want to subscribe to a healthcare service. That's the entry point for us. So innovative approaches that move beyond simple SMS and IVRS solutions. What we are all trying to focus is on a 360. If the consumer has a problem, one, you're trying to provide them with information which is actionable. Two, if the problem still persists, is there a way to outreach and is able to call out to someone? That's where the ecosystem play comes in. If a consumer calls in, can we guide that call back to an ecosystem, and would he be in a position to address his query immediately? That's what we would want to really achieve there. So mobile interventions also drive as a reinforcement to programs on the ground. So you could mix it up with all the various activities which happen at the ground level and try to get a 360 out going there. In summary, through Nokia Life alone, we have more than 100 million users in about 4 countries now. And more than 12 million updates is what we provide as information to all our consumers on a daily basis. So that's the power of what we have been able to achieve in the last 4 years, and it has been prima facie to all the collaborations which we have had so far. Thank you.
Thanks, Natish. That was wonderful. The list of partnership is already quite full on the screen. So, interesting. I just wanted to, before asking Akhi to come up, I wanted to give you an example of a mobile woman in Rajasthan. And she is 23-year-old. Her name is Rakhi Paliwal. She gets up 4 o'clock in the morning. She is a vice sarpanch. She gets up 4 o'clock in the morning, takes her bike. She drives bike in the village and start going around 2 rounds and finds any woman who is going out for early relief. She stops them and tells them that what you should do even if you're going out in terms of hygiene. Since you don't have a toilet, I must tell you. So she is one of the mobile women without mobile. So and sanitation thing that he gave example, I thought that I should share with you. Akhi, please come over and share a couple of things. Can we just hold the questions a little bit so that we finish this with the Sris? So Akhi is sitting on something. She is the public policy head of Facebook. Please come over. You can. You don't have to use slide at all if you don't want to. And she is sitting on 60 million Indians on Facebook, and she just corrected me that it is not 60, it's 78 million. And only a couple of weeks back that I asked her, she said 60 million or something. So it's increasing every day.
Thank you, Sama. We just updated, just to give you a sense of numbers, how Facebook is growing in India. We just updated our public monthly active users, and as of March 2013, we have 78 million active users in India. A lot of this population is on mobile, and what we are also seeing is that most of the usage of Facebook is happening on mobile. And one interesting feature of Facebook in India is that the availability of the service is not only on smartphones, which are the more high-end phones, but also the feature phones, which are the cheaper phones, which starting from 800 rupees, the Spice, Lava, all of that, and going up to 1,500 or 2,000 rupees. So that is in a nutshell in terms of how we are growing as a service, as a social networking platform in India. In terms of looking ahead, in terms of looking at the growth of the internet in India, and depending on what is your sweet spot and which study you're inclined to believe more. There is Rajat is here from ICRIER. There's an ICRIER number. There's also a McKinsey number. They kind of match up pretty well. And the projection is by 2015 that there will be 350 to 370 million internet users in this country, and that in itself will have a staggering impact in terms of GDP contribution of this population in our country. Now, in terms of looking at the impact of social media technologies like Facebook and mobile technologies on society, on various causes, I just wanted to sort of present two examples, and this is something I think is fairly recent, has been in the news, and people are aware of this. One is, of course, the entire anti-rape legislation movement, which started after December 16th. And if you saw how the Justice Verma Committee solicited inputs, they really relied on crowdsourcing in terms of hearing people's voices, in terms of hearing gender activists and various concerned citizens who wanted to contribute to the legislative drafting process. And they used various social networking mechanisms, including Facebook, to reach out and gather legislative input. We also had public action being coordinated on Facebook. There were groups such as Occupy Rajpath, which used the platform very effectively, as well as other social networking platforms in terms of organizing the vigils, sit-in protests, etc., which you saw, which immediately followed after that unfortunate incident. From an activism perspective, I think it just became an intensely useful and powerful tool. It's a free tool. It's available for people to use. And it's perfect, and it's completely open. So really what you are looking at is community action and relevant use of that by various interested groups. The second thing which also happened is that one was a legislative exercise, but you are also trying to attack social norms, because so much of the gender debate is about norms. And one of the things which came out after the December 16th incident, there was this rhetoric that, oh, why was she out so late? Maybe she deserved it because she was out so late. And there was this group of women who formed a community on Facebook, which they call Night Walkers. And their entire hypothesis was that, well, we are here, deal with it, we are going to be out every night. So I think there were a combination of things which we saw. We saw things in terms of the legislative action front, we saw the activism front, but we also saw how the medium was being used for attacking established social norms. And I think the beauty is that these things happened because the technology was free, it was open, it was available, and then it was really people who decided to use it in a particular way because certain conditions existed and they wanted to change those conditions clearly. So one of the premise of most social media is that these have to be open platforms, and for them to be successful in any environment, in any society, they have to be a very, element of human rights protection in the country where they are operating, particularly freedom of speech and expression. So I know one of the previous speakers spoke of the unfortunate Bangalore incident where there was migration, etc. One thing which we are seeing increasingly and which is kind of becoming a challenge in India is the approach. One, of course, there are problems in the law, and it is before the courts, and courts are examining that in terms of, what are the infirmities there and whether they should be reviewed. So I don't want to go into that technical discussion, but clearly, I mean, it is a contested topic, it is before courts. But the second point is really, how can the governments and in fact enforcement agencies use these mediums rather than clamping down on it? An SMS ban for 3 days in a city like Bangalore because you want to prevent exodus, one could argue is not the most intelligent thing to do. In Britain, in UK recently, which is again a very multicultural society, when the race riots happened recently, they used these platforms for counter speech. And though there was pressure from various conservative sections of the society to ban these services, they resisted from the temptation from doing that. So I think there is a certain element of appreciation which we need to have for being an open democracy and really use these tools to our advantage rather than acting in a situation, in a way which will clamp or quell these tools. So I just wanted to make that larger policy point that we are an open democracy, and in terms of how we use these tools, that should be consistent with those principles. The second challenge I think which we need to deal with is that we need, I think, for these services to become more pervasive or to reach the kind of numbers which both Rajat's study and also the McKinsey study has projected, is that we need more policy certainty on the infrastructure side. So what we've seen of late in the telecom sector, at least there's been a whole lot of unsettled questions which need to be addressed in terms of when is the unified licensing policy is going to be finally out, what are the certainty which operators are going to get in terms of making future investments in rolling out networks. I think that is one issue which needs to be dealt with. The second thing I think for these data services to become more pervasive is that how do we address the pricing issue? How do we make it more affordable, both at an OEM level as well as the data pricing level with telcos charge? And for that to happen, clearly, there is a whole lot of reform in terms of an infrastructure policy which needs to be resolved. I think the biggest question today before us is to how do we roll out the universal data access services in this country, and for that to happen, you just need to pour bandwidth, you know. And we're not seeing that happening at the speed at which it should happen. And I'm sure Rajat will cover more of that because he's done this brilliant study and they have more analysis to present. But I just felt that from an infrastructure point of view, from the challenges point of view, I think just making sure that we are preserving fundamental rights as a country is an important thing, is something which we ought to be cognizant of. And the second is that of making sure that there's more policy and certainty on the infrastructure reform side are the two aspects which I just wanted to call out. Thank you. And if there are any questions, I'll take them later.
Thank you very much. One thing we were discussing yesterday about Facebook is that, you know, everything is open on Facebook. We can literally, anybody can go do anything. What we can get extra knowing you for all the stakeholders. So you think about it and we'll talk about in collaboration. So our next person to share the perspective is from Qualcomm, Anirban Mukherjee, who is the senior manager. They have a project called Wireless Reach, and they work lots of NGOs to make work in the remote areas with various kind of innovative ideas. So Anirban.
Being here, thanks so much. And I'm Anirban. I work for Qualcomm, which is a wireless technology company. A lot of high-end phones have our chips, and we also provide technologies to 3G, and CDMA was a Qualcomm technology which Tata's, Reliance and MTS kind of used. So I work on the Wireless Reach initiative. Just an introduction to Qualcomm. We are a relatively young company as compared to many other tech companies, though not as young as Facebook. So we are about 20. Okay. Yeah.
That mic doesn't have a radiation, so you can come closer.
Yeah. So we are about 25 years old, and we are the world's largest fabless semiconductor company. So as everybody says, you know, the mobile is the biggest platform in the history of humankind. There are about 6 billion wireless connections. Wireless Reach project is a strategic initiative of Qualcomm. We work in underserved areas with partners, and currently we have about 84 projects in 33 countries around the world. I just want to give you a flair of, we work on many projects in entrepreneurship, in health, in education across the world, but I would just like to take some time and talk to you about the projects which we are doing in India. So we have been working with the MS Swaminathan Foundation for about 6 years now. What we do is we take data from the Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services, and we provide information on wind speed and wave height and potential fishing zone to the farmers, to the fishermen, sorry. And this practice has been applauded by NCAER when they did an implementation, you know, when they did an evaluation report of the Ministry of Earth Sciences. The theme of the conference is use of mobile phones for social and behavior change. And let me just take some time to talk to you about a very innovative project that we are doing, which is use of mobile phones for change, but not in the way that you would kind of imagine. As you know that, most Indians in rural areas, they use the traditional cook stoves for cooking their food. and that creates a lot of smoke, and it leads to, I mean, world over, it leads to about 4 million deaths across the world due to indoor air pollution. And various people have been trying to promote the use of clean cook stoves, but clean cook stoves are quite expensive. So what our partner is trying to do is that if there is some way they could get money from the carbon credit market, from selling the carbon credits, because the clean cook stoves reduce pollution considerably, then it could provide a financial incentive for clean cook stove adoption. So what our partner has done, our partner is Nextleaf and Terry. What they have done is they have developed a sensor, and the sensor connects to a mobile phone, and it records the temperature of the cook stove and keeps transmitting the temperature back to a central server. So this way you can find out, how many hours the cook stove has been used, and then you can derive the carbon credits, you can derive the savings in pollution versus a traditional stove, and you can get money for it. So as when we speak about use of social for change, it's not just, that, I mean, a kind of a dumb phone which is just acting as a sensor can also be an instrument of change. But there is a lot of things which need to be done. As we have said that, you need to kind of educate the users about cooking on a clean cook stove. You need to kind of devise the sensors on how they will record the data from the cook stove. So there is a lot of infrastructure which needs to be done before we can kind of start using mobiles for any kind of change. So this is kind of, I just wanted to give a project which achieves that. We have several other projects. We have projects in the domain of education. We work with Sesame Workshop, both internationally and in India. Anuragni was here yesterday and she spoke about our collaboration. We are going to be working with the Mobile Health Alliance in world over, and we are going to deploy some tools which will empower the frontline health workers in improving the health of mother and child. So there are a lot of partnerships which are there, and we look forward to working with the various stakeholders in India, NGOs, private organizations, to deploy mobiles in underserved areas and to benefit the masses. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So our next speaker is Prashant Kapoor from Vodafone. And the good relevance is that just 2 days back, I was reading a news that Vodafone is the largest telco in the country in rural India. So they have the largest database. So perhaps he can tell us who in rural India, does he have any demographic to share which can relate to social and behavioral change.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's just moved for a short notice. My boss was expected to come. He had something very emergency, so I just moved in. I am without a presentation, but I'm sure I'll be able to cover a few very, very important things. First, about Vodafone. Vodafone has around 150 million users across all the 23 circles where we work. Voice is where we dominate, but we started working a lot of work on data. There's a lot of debate which happens over the period of time, mobile versus computer, which is going to be the big one in the coming years, in the coming months. And answer is out. All of us know mobile is going to be big, as shared with our colleague from Nokia. In terms of distribution, Vodafone has around 1 million outlets, 1.1 million outlets across the 23 circles where we have. Whereas computer would be available at some 20 or 40,000 outlets vis-a-vis across all the circles which are present. Recently it was announced, in fact last week it was announced, in terms of rural base, Vodafone has become the leader in terms of the rural consumers which we have. 4 years back, we have acquired 4 new circles in Bihar, Jharkhand, Jammu Kashmir and Northeast. And that is where we're doing a lot of work in the rural areas. In terms of our penetration, if you see, we have already reached all the villages which are 500 plus population. The 50,000 villages which are left, as mentioned by him, we can get that list, or I think our national team will have that list, we'll work on that and definitely make it better. Mobile, since they have launched, have added a lot to GDP as it is available in newspapers and a lot of publications. The next big thing which is happening is in data. The data is going to be very, very big, and the bigger action on data is going to happen on mobile and not on computer. We're looking at doubling our data revenues this year, and that's a focus internally which we're building upon. And when data gets built up, place to place, city to city, and village to village, you can generate a lot of uses out of it in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of farmer. In fact, last 2 odd years, I've been working very, very closely on a new project, which I specialize, which is a banking. We are launching a new thing which is called Banking on Mobile. This service was launched by Vodafone in 2006 in Kenya. This service is called M-Pesa. This is banking on mobile. Now it is available in 7 countries. And if you add population of 7 countries, which are launching in the 8th country, which is India. We have tested this product in Rajasthan for good 1 year. The results have been very, very encouraging. The test was done in 2011 and 2012. And basis those test results, we're launching this service across all the 23 circles. We have already launched this service in Eastern India. As I shared with you, we have 1.2 million outlets. All these outlets can have a capability to become a bank. All the banking transactions which are done on the brick and mortar format can be done through these outlets. In East India, we have close to 9,000 banks and branches which are available. Whereas in last 5 months, we've already added 12,000 outlets which have the capability of banks. Now, over the period of time when this service gets developed and move forward, it can work very, very closely. The primary facie objective of this server is transferring of money from a city to a rural area. All the people who have come from rural area working in cities find great difficulty in sending money back. And when they're sending money back, the charges are as high as 10%, 15%. And when the postmaster reaches home in a rural, let's say Bihar kind of scenario where I was working for 5 months in the last year, by the time he reaches the home, he charges 400 or 500 rupees extra. So the total charges which happen is around 12 to 15%. So we are creating a pan-India network. In the next 4 months, we'll be available in UP East, Delhi, UP West, Mumbai. We are already available in Bihar, Bengal, Calcutta. We're doing it smartly and we're doing it slowly because it's to do with the money. Once this project is ready and we are available at, let's say, 2 odd lakh outlets which we're working on, there are a lot of things which were tested in Rajasthan can be worked. For example, I was part of the project where we worked in Alwar with an NGO, where NGO payments can be done through this network. There are a lot of self-help groups can be worked along with this service, where their payments, when the monthly or the daily or the weekly payments which can be worked out with this network. Our partner in this entire effort is ICICI. Because mobile is so cheap, it can reach anywhere. A bank branch cannot. So that is what we're working on. So in the coming 6 to 8 months, we see a lot of work happening on mobile banking and supporting a lot of NGOs, self-help groups once our entire distribution is ready. Thank you.
Can I request you to come here, and Anirban? And who else spoke? Natesh, can you please come? And Aki. So we are opening this one for a little question and answer, so that the industry part can be taken care of in terms of what we have got from them. And then we will get into this, the next lot, which is NGO and civil society. So anybody who would like to ask a question? Madan?
A question for Vodafone. What percentage will you charge for mobile money? You said it's 15% with non-mobile channels. So if it comes through Vodafone, what will your charge be?
We're looking at 1 to 3%. In fact, even post office charges 6%.
Okay. You?
I'm Surabhi Mittal from CIMIT, and I was earlier working with ICRIER. On Qualcomm, just a remark, before NCR did a study on Qualcomm, ICRIER did before that. and I think you should recognize that also in your slides. Rajat is here, and that study was along with Rajat at eCareer. On Vodafone M-Pesa, I have a question. When you're planning and you're already in the planning stage, credit and insurance, besides microfinance, credit and insurance is a very crucial factor which can be delivered through mobile phones, and M-Pesa in Nairobi had been doing it along with many research institutions. So probably that's just a suggestion, and probably you might be thinking on it, but...
Yeah, we are in the process of creation of distribution. Once it's ready, then a lot of features and things can be added upon. So that is already in one of the...
because we were interacting with M-Pesa in Nairobi through our Nairobi office, and we thought of collaboration, and they mentioned something is happening. But that meeting happened 2 years back, and we're still waiting for things to happen.
No, it's part of the plan.
Yeah. More questions on Nokia. We have been tracking Nokia tools, agriculture. I'm talking specifically on agriculture since last 3 years. And what the slide that you showed, I pretty much don't see much change. It's still market prices. It's still basic information and weather. What farmers right now need is much, much more than that. And yesterday we had a lot of discussion on those things. So, and you said you're working with Ministry of Agriculture on some aspects. So we'd like to know what added in addition to this to reach to the micro level farmers is happening in that context.
Sure. So I think we have evolved our agriculture service. It's more interactive now. Now the entire process is in terms of mapping onto the farmer's farming cycle. Right from preparing the land to sowing, right up to the harvesting, the various inputs which he needs at every point in time. It might not be market prices every time. So market prices do come in around the harvest point in time there. So that's what we do now today. So each farmer, depending on the crops he has chosen, he gets pertinent information depending on what he needs at that point in time. We've also evolved to have elements like Ask an Expert. This typically comes in during the growth stage of the crop, where he has noticed certain pest infestations and is wanting to reach out to people, experts primarily, and wanting to clarify on those issues. We have an Ask an Expert, so along with the content there's a number which gets published, and depending on what sort of advisory we have provided, he's able to just click on the number and the call there's a missed call which is recorded at our center, and we pass this on to the ecosystem. There again the ecosystem comes in. This is where the ministry also comes in fairly handy. Some of these questions are routed via their Kisan call centers, correct? And some of these are addressed via institutions like ICAR, Indian Council for Agriculture Research, or the Tamil Nadu Agriculture University, depending on whatever network we have in terms of an ecosystem, where a call gets out to them and they are then able to address these kind of queries out there. At every point in time, we also try and be a part of this conversation, record these conversations, create a knowledge base, and also try and see were there any issues in terms of dialects and so on and so forth there, and how do we moderate this much better. It's a process which we are evolving, and huge amount of traction out there.
What's the role that corporate social responsibility plays? Particularly, we have $4 companies that are being represented. And Anki, I just heard a lot of the work that you're doing with the NASSCOM team in terms of security, with the Mumbai police, for example. So what the changes in the social behavior and the social activities and environmental activities that you're all looking at, to my mind, they all present a business opportunity. Is that true, or do you classify much of the work that you've talked about as part of your corporate social responsibility, and what's the play between those things?
So quick comments from...
So in Qualcomm, we look at the wireless reach as a strategic initiative, but it is something to do with our social responsibility as well, to trying to give back to the society. But we also look at it as something like, early business development, some of these ideas, because they're aimed at, a very large swath of people, 3 billion people. So we expect they may scale and they may become good, viable business opportunities for us also.
So from a Nokia point, it goes project to project. Certain projects we've had our CSR arms to be a complete part of it. For example, the Arogya World initiative which is presented, reaching out 1 million, it means a lot of consumer acquisition costs and a lot of those creation costs which do come in. Of course, research also has to be validated by a third party because it's going to get published. That's where Nokia pitched in with its contribution, not only from the platform but also monetarily as well. But there are certain projects where certain corporate majors might be willing to subsidize. Now, end result is that we want as much content flowing, actionable content going to the consumer, but it should be free. For example, farmer-related content, we would want someone to subsidize. That's where we try to approach entities like NABARD, which is also a catalyst in these kind of initiatives, and we try to see if they are able to fund those kind of elements out there. So it's a mix and match depending on the project. Yeah.
So, yeah, I've revisited my opinion in terms of definition of CSR after being at Facebook, because I think our fundamental premise as a company, our mission is to build a more open and connected world, and it is a free service. Anybody can use it, which is why we are super focused in terms of this notion of universal access of data services. I think there is a boatload of work which needs to happen at the policy level in terms of the infrastructure reform, so that we see in data services the same thing playing out what happened on voice telephony on mobile in 2004. And we need to look at what are those conditions which have to be created for that kind of market level innovation to happen, both at an OEM pricing level as well as the telco operator pricing level, because our service is free as the rest of the other internet services. So we really fundamentally believe there's a force of good and people should use it as much as possible. I think the, sort of the barriers, if you will, are really the infrastructure factors which are gating both the market-based innovation practices and the delivery of these services to a much larger number of people than, they should potentially could reach.
Thank you. Prashant, you want to say something?
You said there are different projects which are meant for different objectives. Telecom core business definitely is a business interest. That's why we are therein. Whereas if you talk about this banking thing which I referred to, we will not make any money in the first 5 years. Okay, so it's largely to do with social responsibility. Along with that, we keep on doing a lot of activities with respect to social responsibility. We have a separate social responsibility head at the director level. 46 people, 2 from each circle. We have 23 circles where we work in. They go and work for minimum 2 months. Okay, to the deep rural heart and work with child and women in a kind of an NGO. And a lot of other social network change which we do. For example, recently we just done a small project which is to do with, that's called Red Rickshaw, where there's a first auto lady driver from Gurgaon was moved ahead along with him. So there are a lot of other projects which we do for the social responsibility.
Okay, Sanjay, you had a question?
Okay. Hi, I'm Sanjay from UNICEF Jharkhand. And my first question is it's not a question, it's a clarification. I'm here as a learner and collaborator. So it's for Nokia and Vodafone. Something to what you said. My question is, how do you select your area of operation for such kind of initiative? Let me give you an example. Imagine if there were 24 health secretaries of different state government here, and they saw your presentation and they said, very exciting, we also want you to do this work in these 24 states. So will you go ahead and do it, or are you guided by your parent company? That's first. And second, I also understand that social business model is not always bad. It's many a times there are examples which proves that they are sustainable model. So do you also see it as a social business model in different states? And if yes, how?
So I'll answer the later question first. Yes, the entire notion is that this is not a CSR exercise for us. And as you rightly said, these initiatives has to be sustainable. There has to be certain monetary thing coming out so that the investments and the evolution continues. Or else it will be those one-off pilots which we normally hear, with a great deal of attention, and then next year we again see the same pilot getting replicated in the same area. So that's not the intention. So intention here is it has to be sustainable. So it's a business motive there. Having said that, there are specific projects, which aligns with the fundamental principles of Nokia social obligation, which also align with our CSR people out there. For those projects, if there is merit, we also go to the extent of funding it completely. So that's the second step out there. In terms of the projects which you pick and choose, it depends on the amount of social impact which you do. Normally, Nokia's intent has been that can we do a before-after measurement? Has there been a significant improvement after a certain intervention? Where projects are measurable, that's what we would want to go after, and projects should be measurable and scalable. So, for example, if it is 24 states and if you have to deal with about 240 agencies, then that's something which we would want to avoid. Maybe 24 states but dealing with 24 entities, and that's a much better scenario for us. For example, in agriculture, we have MOUs with all the state government bodies out there. And much easier for us to navigate that rather than having to go to some 240 other agencies out there. So that depends on how the scope of the project gets.
You would like to quick comment?
As I said, we have dedicated budgets for CSR. There's a core business, and this is taken side by side. And we do a lot of activities I shared. In terms of this particular project which I talked about, this is largely rural based. Okay, and there are a lot of development and action which you'll see in the coming years on the same.
I think what also Sanjay meant is by saying that if he talks to the Secretary of Health in Jharkhand and says that yes, I want to implement, how quickly can you partner and not look a timeline?
No, I mean, as long as there's a catalyst out there, like for example, NABARD was a catalyst in Kerala, we were able to talk to the state government, and then things become much easier. Similarly, an NGO can also do the same thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. You want to...
Question. It's very related and it's open to everybody. How open are you to just not start a new project, but to scale up something that's already ongoing on the one side? And second, open up what you have been working on as an innovation, say Bridget, for instance, to allowing it to be scaled up by others. So it goes both ways. An innovation that you worked with, but can be scaled up by others. How open are the policies for that? And then how open are you to start something new?
So under the Qualcomm Wireless Reach portfolio of projects, we are very open to scaling up existing initiatives. We have something called the call for proposals, and that's now on. So we have a call for proposals which is now on. So in case any of you want to take your existing proposals, existing projects and scale it using funding from Wireless Reach, that's there. But of course there are some criteria that we have on the type of projects we take. We mostly take up projects which use, what you call smartphone technologies and mobile data. I mean, we would prefer to say 3G, but 3G is not there across India, and it's there available in only very small pockets. So mobile data, and we would look at things which have a very strong alignment with the existing priorities of the government and which are scalable and sustainable. So these are the things we look at. And all our projects are executed by partners. So, I mean, I think those partners would be more than willing for you to, learn from those projects and scale it up anywhere. So that's what the approach of Qualcomm Wireless Reach is.
So coming to your first question in terms of can an entity leverage on whatever we have today, yes, we are fairly open. In fact, the diabetes initiative was exactly that. We had about 30 million odd users who were already subscribed to a Nokia health service. So out of that, carving out to 1 million specifically for diabetes and getting them to opt in was one such leverage example which we can sort of provide. Similarly, we've done that in agriculture as well, where for the tractor thing which you talked about, again, it was a subset of the overall base we have to literally look at. So we are fairly open. We encourage the ecosystem to come and ask us that this is the project and we need immediate scale, and so that's exactly what we also look at. With regards to the other aspect in terms of how open are we in terms of getting others to leverage on it, yes, I mean selectively yes, as long as it is non-conflicting, so we are fairly open on that aspect as well. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I think the way we've worked with non-profits are in two ways. One is what we've seen is that NGOs typically want avenues where they can disseminate the work which they are doing and build a profile for an awareness for the work which they are doing. And second is also Facebook as a platform is a great platform for resource matching. So you are able to target and reach out to people that you want to, which you may not be otherwise be able to, because there are other constraints towards achieving a scale impact or a scale model. So what we do is that we have a training program for nonprofits where we hold this town halls as well as captive training sessions for large NGOs where there are people in Facebook who sort of create these training courseware which they use in terms of a teacher training model just to explain as to how do you build an optimal Facebook presence, how do you build a profile for your work, how you find people connected to similar causes, etc. I mean, it's a great, most nonprofits want dynamic feedback all the time, and they want scalable statistical tools. The problem with any research activity is that it is very resource intensive. And also your statistical tools, the way you sort of do your sample size is much more smaller if you use the traditional model. Whereas if you use platforms like Facebook to conduct a poll or a research in terms of getting dynamic feedback, your ability to do that in an informed way is much better. There's one example which I'll give where we worked with PSI, Population Services International, and they are running some pilots. In that particular project, we've partnered with Unilever's clean drinking water project, where they basically have trained these community health workers to go and propagate the value of clean drinking water. And they've partnered with PSI to do that, as well as they have given them alternative sources through this Pureit sachets. And they've used Facebook as a platform to raise for fundraising, the resource matching stuff which I talked about, because with 1 billion people on the platform, it's very easy for you to go and raise fund for a cause which you care about. And they have done that through a fundraising app. That fundraising effort has been used to create a subsidy for funding the Pureit water sachets, which have been given to the family units in this cluster where the pilots are running. So I think it's still very early stages in terms of use of the platform for targeted interventions, whether in health. We've seen a lot more success in education because it's moved to a stage of measurement now, but in health it's still very early days. In agriculture also it's moved to a lot of measurement stages simply because we've had great field demonstrations and implementations by groups like Digital Green, etc. Where we've really seen measurable success has been more in terms of the area of politics, open democracy, and transparency, voter turnout, etc. We feel that a lot of the learnings from these environments can eventually land itself in the health domain. We're some way off, but we'll get there.
Pilots are definitely useful in scaling up any project. Successful pilots do give leads on how to scale up also. But at the same time, I think you will also have to agree that the overall budget available also with you finally does make a difference on whether you are able to scale up or not after successful pilots.
We are a very technology heavy company. In fact, innovation is part of our DNA as we are a technology company. There are a lot of work which we do as we shared. SMS is a great tool to reach a large number of people across India. So any new project which you think can be taken up, we are more than welcome. We'll take it up to our concerned authority and we can work around that.
Okay, great. I think we have a question from MHRD.
Yes. Yeah, I am Gaya Prasad. I am director in the Ministry of HRD and looking after midday meal scheme. Because my team is here just to learn how best we can utilize the services of the mobile, because we are working since last 1 year on this IVRS system to monitor the midday meal scheme. This was the initiative of the ministry to use the IVRS technology in Uttar Pradesh, and this project is already working and it has been incorporated in the report also. Here, the ministry has already, I am here not to ask any question, just to share my views, because how we are going to utilize this mobile technology in monitoring of the midday meal scheme, because my scheme covers more than 12 lakh schools and more than 11 crore children availing midday meal on school, but at present we don't have any system to get the information on daily basis from the schools. We are going to use this IVRS technology, and we have already prepared the RFP document, and it will be uploaded within a fortnight to impanel the service providers. We are going to impanel more than 10 service providers to use this technology to collect the information directly from the schools. We are working, but this today, because I think there was this wireless reach. I don't know, maybe this may be the new technology. But at present, we have this IVRS system, because Dr. Amarjit Singh, you may be aware that Dr. Amarjit Singh is my additional secretary. We are working on this scheme, and hopefully Vodafone and other service providers, these telecom operators, they may be more helpful for our scheme. This is just, I would like to inform to the market that we are working on this project to monitor the scheme in an effective manner. That's all. Thank you.
In fact, we had a full-fledged presentation and participation from UP.
Yes.
They had come here and they made the presentation. Yes. The gentleman was supposed to be here now, but he had a flight, he went. Yes. So yes, we are aware and we are very appreciative about this project. Yeah. We know that it is being replicated all over the country. So yes, thank you for letting know that MHRD is taking it to the national level from UP.
Yeah, we have already decided to roll out this project across the country.
Yeah. Okay. I think there was a question by you. Yeah.
This question is to Vodafone. I'm from Department of IT. We are also working on the mobile governance project. I just wanted to know, since you're coming up with M-Pesa, with I guess ICICI Bank, what are your plans to have other banks also? Because the presence of the ICICI Bank may not be to that extent in the rural parts of our country. So what are your plans? Because that's one of the interesting area we wanted to understand.
ICICI is telecom, we are the front end, and ICICI is providing a back end because they are a banking company. As per RBI norms, we cannot go alone. Else we are capable to go alone also. RBI has a back end facility, whereas we have our outlets, as I shared, at every 500 population village, we have an outlet, telecom outlet, who dispenses recharge. So like he dispenses recharge, we have worked out a technology named M-Pesa. He'll be able to dispense the notes also. So it's an SMS-based project, so as a customer, I go to him, to the retailer, show him the SMS, show my ID, and he'll be able to dispense the money. No, it works on USSD.
He's talking about the NCPI, National Payment Corporation of India.
No? Okay. No. See, it's integrated with ICICI Bank. Our system has got merged with ICICI Bank. Okay, the front end happens on telecom, front end happens on phone, and back end happens through the bank. So like you have there's a thing called ETOP. For example, if you go to a counter and buy prepaid recharge, like that you have to buy that recharge in advance. Okay, and yeah, kind of an airtime.
So you're converting airtime into money?
No, that's a separate money. It's a separate thing, but actually you're converting airtime into money.
Something like I go to take a petrol, but I don't take it. I just give a credit card and tell him that itne ka kaat lo and give the cash to me.
Yeah, over the period of time, it can work out as a debit card, but it's too early to talk about. But we have tried those things also.
Since I'm encashing my airtime, I think I would be audible with this.
No, we are recording.
Since this is the usage of the airtime, so is it only available with the Vodafone customers, or any other telecom service provider customers can also avail this M-Pesa facility?
It's a yes and a no both. Yes, in the sense, for an M-Pesa, for you to become, anybody to become an M-Pesa customer, he has to have a Vodafone number. Whereas he can from Vodafone number, he can transfer that thing to any service provider. So for example, we talked about 900 million users. So from that Vodafone M-Pesa service, you can transfer load to any mobile user, which can be taken out from that retailer in a deep village.
Basically, 150 million people can transfer to 650 million people.
No, yeah,
I'm
exactly.
just kidding. And that's last.
Ports out of Vodafone using MNP and they have money on their wallet. What happens then?
He can use that before porting out. Or if he doesn't want to use it, he can go to our store or mini store and get it refunded.
Today morning I discussed with Osama also. We are Nano Ganesh, a remote control of water pump by mobile phone. And I have a pilot project of 1 million units. We want to install in next 5 years in one bunch of state. Every Nano Ganesh will consume one mobile phone, one SIM card, and it will save a lot of amount of water. The electricity of government's asset, it is going to save a lot of government assets. So every component of the society is going to be benefited up by this project. So how partnership can be made possible for to all? I seek, for example, some distribution network from a telecom company or mobile phone company, or maybe some inspirational fundings or investments from government in these regards. And henceforth, there are a lot many things about it.
So I will request not to reply, because when we discuss about the partnership per se, then we will discuss about this one. But this idea is very interesting, that what he is doing, and he is certainly looking at industry partnership. So thank you very much. We'll break for 7.5 minutes for tea. 7 minutes to walk up to the tea and come back, and half minutes to take the tea. Thank you so much. Is to take the tea and come back and start the session once again, so that we can listen to other people. We have a long way to go before we start putting the names into the partnerships. So you still have half an hour.